Cheating has always been a part of football, but in the NFL, the question's never really been as simple as who broke the rules. The real question is, who gets to decide when breaking the rules becomes a scandal? Because the line between gamesmanship, innovation, tough play, and outright cheating has always moved depending on the moment, the people involved, the politics around it, and the money at stake. A snowplow drove onto the field to help decide a game, and somehow that became a funny little story from the good old days. A football lost a little air, and the league treated it like a threat to the integrity of the sport. You could point the finger at the NFL, but fans play a part in this too. They help decide which controversies fade into folklore and which ones get dragged in front of Congress. So when exactly does bending the rules become breaking them? In the early days, technology and tactics move faster than the rules. Sometimes nobody really realizes a rule needs to exist until someone's already standing there with the advantage in their hands. Or in Paul Brown's case, inside his quarterback's helmet. In 1956, Brown had put a radio inside of George Reiterman's helmet. We've talked about this in another video, there should be a link here for you. So the short version's this. Brown had already turned play calling in the command structure. The messenger guards worked, but they were clunky. A player had to run it in, carry the call, and get to the huddle. The radio helmet cut all that out. Brown could talk straight to his quarterback, but the league really had no structure for that. There was no standardized equipment, no oversight, no way to make it fair across the league, and probably no great answer for whether the quarterback should be taking NFL hits with a homemade radio set up in his helmet, so they banned it. And sure, it's technically cheating, but it's barely cheating in the dirty sense. It was just innovation before the league really had a place for it. But then you run into something like Stickum. And Stickum's different because it's the point where the gray area stopped looking clever and started looking ridiculous. At first, it probably didn't feel all that radical. Football had always been a game of grip, leverage, and tiny advantages. Everyone wants a little help holding onto the ball. It's a little pine tar in your hands isn't a big deal. But then it got out of hand. The stuff moved from the hands to the arms to the jerseys, and eventually some players looked like they had been rolled in it before the play. By the time they got through a few plays, they were carrying half the field on their uniforms, and when the ball arrived, it didn't always look caught so much as it stuck the players. Stickum's problem wasn't competitive, it was aesthetic. It made the game look cheap. The NFL could live with players hunting for an edge, but it couldn't have receivers and defensive backs looking like human flypaper. At some point, the advantage mattered less than the image. Fred Biletnikoff set the Stickum standard for the NFL films era. All the Raiders grit and slow motion mythology with enough tack on him to make every catch look like they came out of a John Facenda fever dream. Lester Hayes turned the whole thing into spectacle, covered so heavily that every interception looked less like a catch and more like a football getting stuck to the side of a building. Then there was the sideline ritual itself. Guys would walk over, dunk their hands in the bucket, smear it all over themselves, and come out to the huddle ready for the next series. What was interesting about Stickum though is it moved cleanly through the cheating pipeline. For a while, it was just football. A little help with a grip and a sport built on hidden advantages. But then it became too ugly and too impossible to ignore because the game started looking less like players making catches and more like footballs getting trapped in glue. But years later, the same basic idea came back with better packaging, and once Nike could sell it as glove technology, nobody had to call it cheating anymore. But the crown jewel of whoops, we forgot that should have been a rule is the holy roller, which, if I'm being honest with you, is one of the classiest cheating moves of all time. It's week 2 in San Diego, 1978, Raiders-Chargers, and Oakland's about to start the season 0-2. The Chargers lead 20-14 and the Raiders have the ball on the 14-yard line. There's 10 seconds left for Kenny Stabler to find an answer before the whole afternoon ends. At that point, what are you really saving? Your dignity? The rulebook? Just get the ball in the end zone and let everyone else sort it out. So the ball came loose, and then it became the dumbest relay race in football history. Stabler knocks it forward, Pete Banaszak helps it along, Dave Casper bats it, kicks it, chases it into the end zone and falls on it. The Raiders win a game with a fumble that moved like it had a plan, and for years Stabler played dumb. Crazy play, wild bounce, just one of those things. He flashed that Kenny Stabler smile and everyone remembered why they hated the Raiders. Years later, he admitted what we all already knew. Yeah, he threw that ball. What else was he supposed to do? The NFL had to change the rule right after that because once you watch a team turn a fumble into a forward pass with extra steps, you kind of have to. But the real mystery is, why don't you see more of this? You're out of time. You're out of clean football. The game's already gone unless someone does something stupid, so why not try something stupid? The holy roller is the old version of this problem. The rulebook has a screw loose, a team finds it, and the league tightens it after the fact. The modern version is worse because the rule already exists and everyone knows the cost. But the cost of breaking the rule is sometimes less than the cost of playing it straight. You know when a company steals $1 billion and the government fines them $250 million and we all call it justice, even though the company just kept the other $750 million? Sometimes football penalties work the same way. A rule is supposed to stop something, but the penalty only prices it. Once the price is clear, coaches stop asking whether the play is legal and start asking whether the price is worth paying. The NFL already understands the danger here, which is why defensive pass interference is a spot foul instead of the college version that caps it at 15 yards. If the punishment were always 15 yards, every Randy Moss route would have come with an emergency break. The moment he got behind you, the smart play would have been to grab him, tackle him, and take the bill. That's hack-a-shack and shoulder pads. You're not preventing the foul because the foul's already become part of the strategy. Even with the NFL spot foul, the crime can still be worth the time. If the receiver's about to walk into the end zone, putting the ball in the one's still better than watching him score. But that opens up a fun new version of this problem built around the brotherly shove. The Eagles abused Jalen Hurts' insane lower body strength to push the pile forward. And don't worry, we're going to get to that in a minute. But on the goal line, defenses eventually start treating the penalty like part of the play. You try to jump the snap. If you time it right, you blow the whole thing up. If you get flagged, it's half the distance to the goal line and the ball moves a fraction of an inch. Like Lester Hayes, it's the visual that puts the referees in an awkward spot. At some point, we're not really playing football anymore. We're just playing rules lawyer. The Eagles line up for the brotherly shove. The defense tries to jump it. The flag comes out. The Eagles line up again. The defense tries it again. The question isn't whether the defense broke the rule. Of course they broke the rule. The question is whether the penalty is strong enough to make them stop. It's really one of the most NFL problems imaginable. The league tries to litigate its problems away. It's baked into the culture at this point. Instant replay didn't just help officials correct a call, it taught everyone to treat every inch of a play like a courtroom exhibit. So the NFL keeps reshaping rules to account for the silly things coaches do to manipulate the rulebook. Exceptions pile up on top of exceptions. Timing rules, runoff rules, untimed downs, half the distance enforcement. Things that only exist because some coach somewhere looked at an old rule and said, you know, actually, I can use that. Then you've got the Ravens abusing it in the most obvious way possible. See, penalties are about as old as the sport itself. Football figured out pretty early that the defense can't be allowed to end the game by cheating on the final play. If the defense commits an accepted live ball foul as time expires, the offense gets another snap. But if the offense commits the same foul, the game's over. That's on you. It's reasonable enough, right? Until you realize that the punting team is still the offense until the ball's kicked. So in 2016, the Raiders are up 19-12 on the Bengals with 11 seconds left. They don't want to punt it clean. They don't want Cincinnati getting a return or a lateral play or a Hail Mary. They look at the rulebook and realize, you know what? The penalty's useless if the clock's already dead. So they did the most sensible thing possible. They tackled the Bengals punt rushers. Sam Koch takes a snap, runs around, burns the clock, finally steps out of the end zone for a safety. Behind him, Ravens are grabbing Bengals like the punt team got replaced with nightclub bouncers. Flags are everywhere, penalties on basically the entire offense, and none of it matters because the Bengals can't accept their way back in time. The game's over. That's a team just reading the rulebook correctly and realizing the NFL forgot to make the punishment hurt. It's not even really that sneaky. When it is sneaky is when you can tell that a play smells funny, but you can't really tell where it's coming from. If a guy holds, you throw the flag. If a team takes a penalty on purpose, you patch the rule. But what do you do when a player drops to the ground and says he's hurt? See, in 2011, the Rams were playing the Giants on Monday night. St. Louis had the no huddle moving, and then two Giants defenders went down in the same play. Two guys hit the turf, the offense lost its rhythm, the defense got air, and nobody could prove that the injury is fake unless someone's dumb enough to admit it. The Rams complained to the league. Tom Coughlin said Deion Grant was cramping. Grant said he was hurt. What's the league supposed to do from Park Avenue? Diagnose a cramp through the broadcast? But then in 2012, Emmanuel Sanders made the mistake of making the smell too obvious. Pittsburgh's up late against the Bengals. The Steelers don't want to burn a timeout, so Sanders goes down with what looks like a leg cramp. He leaves for one play, and then he comes right back. The league had to fine Sanders and the Steelers for it, not because fake injuries suddenly became a new problem, but because this one left too many fingerprints. Headsets live in the same fog. The NFL can regulate helmet radios, coach-to-coach communications, cutoff times, backup systems, all of it. But the second a headset dies in a road stadium, nobody hears technical issue. They hear cheating. In 2015, the Steelers opened the season in New England and their coach's headsets started picking up the Patriots radio broadcast. Mike Tomlin was furious after the game and said that was always the case in Foxborough. The league investigated and cleared the Patriots. The official explanation was a stadium power issue that was made worse by the weather. Maybe that's exactly what happened, and maybe Epstein himself. We'll never really know, but the accusation travels faster than the proof. By the time the league says electrical issue, everyone's already smelled the Patriots. Crowd noise works in the same way until somebody leaves a receipt. For years, stadium noise lived in a gray area. Home fans are supposed to make life miserable. That's the point of the home field advantage. In 1989, the league tried to control it anyway. If a visiting team couldn't hear its signals, the officials could warn the crowd, charge the home team a timeout, and eventually started handing out 5-yard penalties. The league was actually trying to referee the crowd. Then Atlanta went and made the whole thing cleaner and dumber. In 2015, the NFL punished the Falcons for pumping artificial crowd noise into the Georgia Dome during the 2013 season and part of the 2014 season. The Falcons lost the draft pick, they were fined $350,000, and President Rich McKay got suspended from the competition committee. The NFL can shrug off a lot when it stays foggy. A player grabbing his calf, a headset dying in the rain, a stadium getting a little too loud. But once there's proof, the temperature changes. It becomes something the league has to name. But sometimes the league doesn't name it and it takes someone else to give it a name. And nobody worked harder in that lane than Bill Polian. Polian is one of the greatest executives in football history. He built winners. He knew the rulebook and he knew the league office. He knew how to turn a football grievance into a league project. Start with Bill Polian after the 2003 AFC Championship game. The Colts just lost to New England 24-14 and Polian understood exactly what had happened to his offense. The Patriots hadn't beaten Indianapolis with some exotic new scheme. They had leaned on the oldest defensive truth in football. If you can disrupt timing, crowd the routes, and make the receivers fight through contact all night, the quarterback has to start playing a different game. But here's the thing. The illegal contact rule already existed. He wasn't asking the league to invent protection for Peyton Manning, he was asking it to enforce the protection he already had because New England had found the gap between the rule on paper and the rule on field. And this is where Polian's at his best, because he didn't just complain that the Patriots got away with something, he turned a complaint into a product argument. He told the league that if they wanted timing, passing, points, and star quarterbacks, then it couldn't let defensive backs turn every route into a street fight. Then in 2015, the Colts lose to the Patriots again, and here comes another complaint. This time it's the footballs, and the first version of the story was perfect outrage bait. 11 of the 12 Patriots footballs were supposedly 2 pounds under the limit. The Patriots had already been caught in Spygate. Brady was Brady, Belichick was Belichick, and the Colts were the complaining team again. The whole thing came pre-loaded, but then the details got messy. The halftime measurements weren't clean. 2 different gauges were used. The Patriots balls were low, but the Colts balls dropped too. On one of the gauges, all 4 Colts balls measured at halftime were under 12.5 psi. The rest of the Colts balls were never measured because the officials ran out of time. It doesn't mean nothing happened, but it means the story outran the evidence. But that's the whole joke. The NFL is no stranger to equipment abuse. In 2014, Panthers and Vikings attendants warmed footballs by heaters during a freezing game in Minnesota. The league warned both teams and everyone moved on. In 2012, the Chargers got investigated over towels suspected of carrying a sticky substance. The league said there was no illegal substance, but they fined San Diego anyway because the towels weren't handed over properly. During Deflategate, Joe Montana said 49ers linemen used to spray silicone on their jerseys so defenders couldn't grab them. He said it like an old football guy telling you where the bodies are buried. This stuff usually becomes a warning, a fine, a story for old players to laugh about. Deflategate became a national narrative because Deflategate was never just about air. It was about Polian. It was about the Colts. It was about Spygate. And it was about years of everyone looking at New England like they were already guilty of the next thing. The spirit of politicking your way to victory hasn't gone away. When Philadelphia turned short yardage into a rugby scrum, the league split into 2 groups, teams with Jalen Hurts and teams filing complaints against Jalen Hurts. The brotherly shove became a referendum on who gets rewarded for being better at something ugly. The Eagles could run it, but most teams couldn't. So we saw the same old arguments re-emerge as they always do. First it was player safety, then it was pace of play, then it was whether the officials could even police the thing with 20 bodies folded on top of a pile. Green Bay pushed to ban it, but the proposal failed in 2025 by 2 votes. That may not be the end of it. The brotherly shove still lives in the same dangerous place every gray area advantage eventually reaches. It's too effective to ignore, it's too ugly to love, and it's too political to leave alone. The football matters, but sometimes the complaint matters more. But the one thing you can be sure that the NFL will always crack down on is being embarrassed. Going against the PR juggernaut that is the NFL will always land you in the doghouse. And the truth is, what's considered embarrassing today may not have been yesterday. In 1989, the Eagles and Buddy Ryan were accused of putting bounties on the Cowboys. When Ryan brought his old school toughness to Philadelphia in 1986, it wasn't just for show, he took aim at the Cowboys first. Buddy Ryan already hated Dallas. During the 1987 strike, the Cowboys used regular players who had crossed the picket line and beat the Eagles team loaded with replacement players. Ryan thought they ran it up, and when the regular players came back, Philly returned the favor. The grudge had already been ignited by that point. Then Luis Zendajas made it personal. Zendajas had been an Eagle earlier in 1989 until Philly cut him. Dallas signed him, and now he was back in the rivalry wearing the wrong uniform. Jimmy Johnson said he had been told that there was a $200 bounty on Zendajas and a $500 bounty on Troy Aikman. Zendajas got blasted on the second half kickoff, he left with a concussion, and the Eagles won 27-0. But the whole thing was basically laughed off. Jimmy Johnson called Buddy Ryan fat. Buddy said he thought he looked good after shedding a few LBs, and the game went down in history as the Bounty Bowl, one of the most revered moments in Eagles history. Flash forward 30 years later, and Sean Payton is getting thrown out of the league for the same thing. The Saints gave the league a version of it couldn't laugh off. The NFL said New Orleans ran a bounty program from 2009 through 2011 with the players paid for big hits and card-offs. Greg Williams was the face of it, and Sean Payton took one of the biggest falls of all, the full 2012 season, and his reputation still hasn't really recovered. Williams got suspended indefinitely. Mickey Loomis got 8 games, Joe Vick got 6, the Saints lost $500,000 and 2 second-round picks. But it's not as though we went from Buddy to Peyton. Bounties have always been a gray area in football culture. In 2008, Terrell Suggs went on Atlanta radio before the Ravens-Steelers game and said that Baltimore had put bounties on Hines Ward and Rashad Mendenhall. Ward had broken Keith Rivers' jaw, and Mendenhall had already had his shoulder broken against Baltimore earlier that season. Suggs walked it back, said he misspoke, but the league sent him a warning letter. Greg Williams brought a trail with him into New Orleans. After the Saints scandal broke, former players said it wasn't just a New Orleans thing. Washington players talked about a similar system when Williams was there from 2004 to 2007. Buffalo players gave mixed accounts about bonuses when he coached there from 2001 to 2003. Tony Dungy said he believed Williams had targeted Peyton Manning back when Williams was with the Titans. Then the Saints handed the league the audio. Williams wasn't talking in vague football code before the 49ers game. He named players. He named ankles. He talked about heads. He talked about Frank Gore's head. He talked about Kyle Williams and concussions. He turned the ugly language of defensive football into evidence. That landed in a league already getting buried by the cost of its own product. Former players were suing over concussions. Junior Seau's death came just 2 months after the punishments. Parents were starting to look at youth football like a risk calculation instead of a rite of passage. The NFL had spent decades selling big hits, then suddenly had to prove it wasn't running a sport where coaches paid for injuries. That's why New Orleans got nuked. The Saints didn't cross the line, they gave the league a defendant at the exact moment it needed one. If you made it this far, thank you so much. If you like this kind of stuff, like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments if there's any weird football history moments we need to cover. Cheating is part of every competitive thing humans have ever invented. The weird part is where the line gets drawn. A team bends the rules today and everyone calls it smart football. 10 years later, the same trick gets a nickname, a fine, a rule change, or a villain. So I'll leave this with you. What's your team getting away with right now that everyone else is going to call cheating tomorrow?